So good to have you join us today. Hello and welcome to Business Daily. I'm Lee-Jiun in Seoul. We have a lot on our plate today, so let's get started by taking a look at the day's highlights. Latest numbers show that Korean companies prefer hiring former bureaucrats as outside directors, while firms in the U.S. like to bring on board directors based on their experience. We hear about the wage peak system a lot in the news these days. How far has Korea come in adopting the system, and how effective will it actually be? Consumer sentiment in Korea has continued on its upward trend for the second month in a row. The Bank of Korea says its composite consumer sentiment index hit 102 in August, 2 points higher than the previous month. A reading above 100 indicates that optimists outnumber pessimists about economic conditions. The MERS outbreak caused the index to tumble from 105 in May to 99 in June, when fears about the virus were at their peak. But the index climbed slightly to 100 again last month as worries began to subside. The central bank also attributed the boost in consumer confidence to government stimulus measures. Meanwhile, the Bank of Korea Governor Lee Ju-yeol has said that China's downward adjustment of its interest rate by a 0.25 percentage point and reserve ratio by 0.5 percentage point on Tuesday will have complex effects on the Korean economy. He said as of now, it's hard to determine what impact the adjustments will have, saying they will come up with different short and long-term consequences. The governor added that the Korean economy is vulnerable to many external factors, along with structural problems at home that include an aging population, low prices, and tepid growth. Facing major variables such as the U.S. rate hike and China's slowing economy, the governor said deciding on Seoul's monetary policy has become more challenging. Let's now get a quick check on how the markets fared here in Seoul today. Korean shares continued their gaining streak on Wednesday on improved investor sentiment in the financial markets, especially after China's surprise rate cut. At the closing bell, the benchmark Kospi was up 2.57%, finishing the day at 1894.09, while the tech-heavy Kosdaq also surged by 3.41% to end at 667.44. The Korean won also gained ground against the greenback, ending at 1,186 won. 4 out of 10 outside directors at Korea's top 30 conglomerates are former bureaucrats. Now, Korean companies have shown a preference for hiring retired senior government officials for their abilities to use political connections to find a way around tight government regulations. Now, companies in the U.S., on the other hand, seem to prefer outside directors with actual field experience. All right, Kim Min-ji has more.
It's been common practice in Korea for conglomerates to hire former bureaucrats as outside directors. Market Tracker CEO Score says among some 600 outside directors at 187 affiliates of the nation's top 30 groups, 39% were former government officials. Only 97 independent directors, or 16%, were from the business community. This is in sharp contrast to the top 100 firms selected by Forbes, which prefer to hire specialists in certain fields. Among 815 independent directors, almost 3/4 were former businessmen, while ex-bureaucrats accounted for less than 10%. Korean companies tend to show a strong preference for retired senior bureaucrats because of their close ties with political circles or the government, which can help them to exert influence. The U.S., on the other hand, prefers those with on-the-job experience. At U.S. retail giant Walmart, for example, 5 out of 9 independent directors are from business circles, including the CEOs of Instagram and Yahoo. Korea's top conglomerate, Samsung Group, hired roughly a third of its outside directors who were former government officials, while the figure stood at about 7% for former businessmen. At 5 Korean conglomerates, including Doosan Group and CJ Group, the proportion of former bureaucrats topped 60%. However, the ratio of outside directors from government circles in Korea is on the decline. The number of former bureaucrats fell 7% from 2013, reducing the overall proportion by almost 3%. Kim Min-ji, Business Daily.
Korea's ports have seen a slight rise in the overall cargo volume processed in July. Compared to the same month last year, nearly 119 million tons of cargo was processed. That's a 0.4% on-year gain thanks to growth in domestic cargo by 3.6%, which more than offset a slide in import-export cargo by 0.2%. The Trade Ministry added that the value of overall exports in July fell by 3.3%, while imports plummeted by 15.3%. From smartphones to high-speed internet and semiconductors, Korea leads among the world's high-tech leaders. It's come a long way from the nation that imported technology decades ago. And our Uniskim shows us the current Korea that is not only betting on ICT to make life more convenient, but also to help propel it to the national income level of $30,000.
As this man passes by a restaurant, a coupon for free pizza pops up on his smartphone, triggered by a device mounted on a nearby traffic signal. With a scan of his iris, this man can make transactions without plastic or cash and pass through secured doors. These are some of the realities made possible by information communications technology, or ICT.
We're anticipating a new era of Internet of Things that will create new economic prosperity for the country.
From high-speed internet and smartphones to semiconductors, Korea leads. In fact, the country's trade balance for the ICT industry in the first half of the year nearly tripled from 15 years ago. As a result, the number of people working in the field grew to some 17 million last year, just shy of 10% of the overall workforce. Recently, the OECD also noted Korea as ranking at the top among countries that boast value-added information communications technology. This is why the government is looking to ICT as a way to unlock a national income level of $30,000.
We believe ICT will play a core role in saving Korea's economy from stagnant growth and slowing growth potential.
As the country puts more weight on ICT investment, it'll keep an eye on competitor countries like the US, with strong players in software, and China, that's catching up and differentiating itself with cheaper prices. Eunice Kim, Business Daily.
When you try to get from one end of the country to the other, it only takes about 3 hours thanks to our very own bullet trains. And now Korea is trying to introduce a state-of-the-art railway technology to other countries. Our Lee Ju-young tells us more.
This is Korea's first high-speed rail line, the Gyeongbu High Speed Railway. The first leg of it opened back in 2004. The second stretch was unveiled in 2010, and now in 2015, construction on the single railway that stretches from Seoul to Busan is over after 23 years of work and $17 billion in investment. Gyeongbu High Speed Railway is just one of the country's high-speed lines, which enables travel to and from almost anywhere across the nation. Attracting around 150,000 passengers every day, these high-speed railways are seen as a major achievement that will push the country's bullet train industry forward.
From running at the 100-kilometer level to the 300-kilometer level, our railway technology, in terms of the tracks, electricity, signals and communication, has advanced greatly.
Korea is currently one of the 5 countries in the world, aside from Japan, France, Germany, and China, that can independently produce bullet trains running above 300 kilometers per hour. Using the technology it has under its belt, Korea's national railroad operator Korail is in the race to win the bid to build a high-speed railway connecting Malaysia's capital Kuala Lumpur and Singapore. Authorities hope to have the railway in place by 2020. Once complete, the bullet train will be able to transport passengers along the 330-kilometer stretch between the two cities in just 90 minutes. The final winner of the contract is scheduled to be announced by the end of this month, and Seoul hopes to nab the deal as it's expected to create 35,000 new jobs and increase the country's GDP by almost half a percentage point. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
It's considered a step forward in reforming the labor market. Large firms have been rolling out plans to adopt a wage peak system, which guarantees employment until retirement, but with lower wages after a certain age. But as promising as this system may sound, the public has so far been divided on this system. Labor unions at companies like Kumho Tire have been on strike for weeks, and many other companies are still negotiating with their employees. And to tell us more about what issues are at the center of this debate, our Shin Se-min joins us in the studio today. Hi, Se-min.
Hi to you.
All right, so I hear a large number of conglomerates or a number of large conglomerates are already promising to implement the system, but I hear things haven't been that easy.
You're right, Yoon. It has been a tough road, and it looks like it will be for the coming months as well. Although the concept itself is not new, having first been implemented back in 2003, with the government's recent push for labor market reforms, this wage payment system has been thrown back into the spotlight.
웃은 만큼 잔소리가 많으세요. 그렇게 30년을 일하시면서
우리 딸 자격증 따느라 힘들지?
나도 아빠랑 같이 출근하고 싶다.
힘내.
Labor reforms mean jobs for our sons and daughters. This is a closing slogan for a public campaign promoting the wage peak system. The government has been stepping up pressure on the public and private sectors to adopt this payment system by the end of this year, with hopes it'll create thousands of new jobs for young people. So far, only 24 of the country's 316 public institutes and less than half of 378 business units under the top 30 conglomerates have said they will roll out this system, much slower progress than the government had hoped for.
It's not an easy task, since arms specializing in different fields have needs for their employees. It'll be tough, but each company is doing its best to meet expectations.
Large firms like Hyundai Motor Group, SK, Samsung, and Tucson Group have unveiled plans to implement the wage system, and they've also promised to take on 73,000 new hires by the end of 2017. Many say it's a tough commitment for companies to make, especially when business has been slowing both domestically and internationally.
Redistributing wages across generations means saving up money for new hires. It also means securing years of paychecks for those newly employed workers, a huge burden for companies.
Regardless, for many public entities, the system seems mostly inevitable, as those that don't meet the government's deadline could be faced with penalties, like little to no annual wage hikes, restructuring, and even budget cuts. The public remains divided over whether the government's efforts will truly lead to favorable conditions in the labor market.
I don't believe cutting wages of experienced workers will help create new hires.
Until we see the outcome, it's hard to believe that companies will execute their plans to hire that many young people.
And while experts believe that the system is headed in the right direction by throwing out old customs, they say it can't be a cure-all to the current situation in the labor market.
The wage peak system and performance-based wage systems should be implemented in order to help ease the difference in salaries among workers at large companies and mid-sized firms.
Adding that the labor market needs to break away from offering unequal treatment and benefits to regular and irregular workers, experts say that more flexibility is what companies need to improve conditions for employees and produce better results for management.
So in terms of effectiveness, the wage peak system has been adopted by companies in the past, but I guess part of the ongoing debate is whether this will actually help to create more jobs.
It does seem to be a different story because, for one, financial firms like local banks, it's been over a decade or nearly a decade since they have been implementing this system. But in terms of results, it's not really producing a desired results. Now, that's not a lot of workers because not a lot of workers stay until they reach their retirement age, and the wage peak system the money saved from the wage peak system has not necessarily led to new hires. So that's also a reason why many are opposed to the idea of the implementation to begin with, and they say there's simply not enough evidence to back it up.
All right, you talked about more flexibility in the labor market. What are some other ways, or what are some other things that need to be done in order to improve the conditions?
Well, for one, people have been calling for a need for fair waging system. In other words, the wage gap between those who work at a larger firm and smaller companies need to be reduced. Because down the line, the wage difference is what keeps many employees from wanting to work at a smaller companies. Now, industry watchers also say scrapping regulations that create obstacles for growth among small firms is also key.
All right, so there's a little over 4 months left until the deadline that you talked about in your report. But how is the government keeping track of what companies has implemented this system?
Well, starting next month, basically next week, the government said that the related ministries will begin its inspection on public institutions to check up on the difficulties in adopting the system. And private businesses will also face more pressure when it comes to that, because failure to adopt may hurt their business image when it comes to in a larger scope, eventually leading to higher taxes under youth unemployment quotas issued by the government.
All right, so soon enough, companies will have to decide on which way they're going to take on this issue.
That's right.
All right, thank you so much for coming in today, Taemin.
My pleasure.
And that brings us to the end. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back tomorrow with more business news that matters to you. Thanks for watching, and have a great day, everyone.